Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this special on-demand webinar by the National Organization for Rare Disorders on transitioning to virtual events. This on-demand webinar is part of our COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series. I am Allie Crafton, NORD's Membership Associate, and I will be facilitating this on-demand webinar. For many years, people with rare diseases walked alone. Patients and their families coped with a lack of treatments and research, in addition to daunting medical and financial issues. Then, a small group of patient advocates formed a coalition to unify this community and mobilize support to pass the Orphan Drug Act. In 1983, the coalition became NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. For more than 37 years, NORD has led the way in voicing the needs of the rare disease community, driving supportive policies, advancing medical research, and providing patient and family services for those who need them most. This is NORD's mission. NORD, an independent nonprofit, is leading the fight to improve the lives of rare disease patients and families. We do this by supporting patients and organizations, accelerating research, providing education, disseminating information, and driving public policy. NORD recently surveyed the rare disease community, collecting feedback from nearly 800 patients and caregivers on the impact of COVID-19 on their lives and medical care. From drug shortages to job and health insurance losses, rare disease families need the support of their rare disease organizations. This data, along with the direct input of NORD's member organizations about their work to support their communities in a virtual world with economic uncertainty, has underscored the need for new tools and approaches for patient advocacy organizations during this time. NORD's member organizations have shared with us that COVID-19 has created substantial obstacles for their organization, specifically the rapidly changing demands on infrastructure, including crisis communications, telework, cancellation of gatherings, conferences and fundraisers, and the direct impact on research and trials. We heard you and launched the COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series to meet these emerging needs. We are expanding our current capacity building and membership support services for you, the leaders of rare disease organizations, with education and resources to become more agile and operate in this new environment. I am excited to welcome Carrie Lucas, NORD's Associate Director of Development and Events, to share NORD's considerations when transitioning from in-person to virtual events. Thanks for joining this webinar today, Carrie.
Thanks for having me, Allie. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We at NORD have gone through many big conversations and had many big conversations in the last few months to factor in many different considerations as we transition from in-person meetings and events into the virtual space. So I wanted to take some time to share with you what was important to NORD as we made these decisions for the remainder of 2020. The COVID-19 crisis impacted all of our plans, and it was important for NORD to take a step back and determine the new direction that we felt was best to serve our community and how to implement these changes for a seamless experience for everyone involved. This platform is going to talk through what we thought were important in making our decisions. So I'm going to start right at the beginning. If you already had an event scheduled for in-person for 2020, you most likely had contracts signed with hotels and other vendors, or if not a hotel, you were at a conference center or some other host venue. Before you cancel those contracts, you need to consider many different things. So the next slide will talk through some of what you want to think through. First and foremost, as always, read your contracts and check the force majeure clause. That should help cover you in this type of a situation where it's impossible to host in-person meetings and events. Be sure to closely follow the government regulations, not where you're located, but where the meeting was going to take place. So most of the states, their governor's offices are leading the reopening phase plans. Washington, D.C., it's the mayor's office that's leading those plans. So make sure to get on those websites, get on those mailing lists, and follow along, because the plans are starting to roll out now. One other word of caution is to be very careful to not talk publicly about your idea of transitioning to a virtual event until you've spoken with your vendors. You don't want to jeopardize your negotiation power with your vendors by publicly making an announcement of your transition to virtual before you've talked to them. You want to treat your vendors as partners and work together to come to an appropriate solution for everyone involved. And this also goes for your board of directors. Make sure that they're involved in the process, but also keeping the move confidential, because you don't want a negative implication on your negotiations. A few things that have come up in conversation for us include considering rebooking the event with your same exact vendors from 2020 into 2021 or 2022, depending on what your predetermined event cycle is. Typically, if the vendor knows that you're only canceling or changing dates because of the virus situation, they're willing to work with you. If for some reason you're not going to cancel, but you're concerned that when you host your in-person event, you're not going to have the same attendance rate that you had originally planned on, talk to your partners and see if they'll work with you and decrease your attrition clauses and or food and beverage minimums. Most hotels and vendors are very anxious to work with us to make sure that we are all able to get back on track. And so it's important to have good conversations. Once you've gotten through the vendor conversation, you need to start looking at the programming for your virtual event. Just like you plan for in-person, you take time to determine what you want to offer to your attendees and how you want to offer it. So it's important to take that same step here when you transition over to virtual, to see if what you're planning to offer in person translates well, or if maybe you need to modify things. One of the things that NORD took a very close look at very early on was the duration of our panels. We are finding in our research that the attention span of virtual presentations is shorter than in person. So maybe I'm talking a little fast today because I don't want to take too much of your time. I think we're all getting tired of virtual, but there's a lot of important information to share. The other thing is that panelists can just click in with a button or two to the content, and you're not worried about breaks between sessions for attendees to navigate hallways and take a bio break and get stuck chit-chatting in the hallway. So you really can start your sessions back to back and promptly. We are finding that we want to keep sessions under an hour, with 30 to 45 minutes being acceptable. And you'll also want to think through the content and determine if your speakers would deliver a live presentation very strongly, or if perhaps some of them should be pre-recorded. You can also think about doing a mix of both. You do want to schedule in a few breaks throughout your day, depending on the duration of your day's programming, but a break longer than 15 minutes could cause people to get distracted away from your meeting or event and not come back. So if you want that live engagement, keep the breaks brief. So when you are looking to modify the length of your sessions, now you need to take a look at how many panelists you were planning to include and speakers. So if it's a shorter session, you're going to want to limit to 2 or 3 people plus a moderator of each session, so that everybody has adequate time to contribute to the conversation and keep the session on time while still allocating for Q&A sessions if that's important to you. I've also listed out the different stakeholder groups that you're going to want to consider when you're modifying your agenda. You know, if you were planning on a 2, 3, 4 day conference in person with ample time to fill, you were really trying to capture probably most of your stakeholder groups. But if you're dialing things back, maybe this particular conference is no longer geared towards the group as a whole, and you might want to dial it in a little bit. So take a look at all these different groups and determine how you want them involved in the program. When you're making the transition, there's so much to think through. It's really planning a whole new event, even though some of the work is already done. You're starting from the top with a lot. So stop and think about registration for a virtual event. What questions are your attendees going to have? Draft a document and post them as FAQs out publicly or in your announcement emails to help lessen the load for those that are receiving the correspondence at your organization. Take into account pricing. What is it going to cost you to host this virtual event versus what it was going to cost you to host an in-person event? What key components are important for you to continue to offer to your community? What components are not important? So something like swag. So many conferences have all the latest gadgets and swag. Is that important to you this year, or are you going to hold off for subsequent years? Again, going back to that registration, once folks have registered to attend, you want them to have a clear understanding of what they can expect. So take a lot of time to really craft an event confirmation email that's custom to your event. Again, wanting to make sure that folks have as many answers to their questions as possible, because this is such an uncharted territory for all of us. You'll want to let people know how are they going to use your virtual tool, how are they able to connect with you and your colleagues, as well as speakers and sponsors. And then when you're going to prepare your speakers, they need to know what the best practices are. What are you expecting out of them so they can prepare accordingly, not only for the panel, but the Q&A session. The moderators are going to need an understanding of what their role will be. And then the sponsors and media partners are also going to know what they can expect and what deliverables will be tracked for follow-up afterwards. Networking sessions are a big reason why people like to attend in-person meetings and events. It gives them face time with people that they're used to connecting with virtually, but all of a sudden they're bumping into new people and new relationships are forming as well. So you'll want to give networking a lot of thought, and how do you transition that to a virtual program? When you're evaluating your software tools, make sure to determine if you want to offer networking and in what format and capacity. Some of the vendors offer networking sessions embedded right in the program, and others, from our experience, don't offer that. So they rely on Zoom or an additional software platform to make sure that they are connecting their attendees. If you are offering networking sessions in a group setting, you'll want to make sure to keep those really small. Just stop and think. We've all attended, various happy hours and fun gatherings over the last few months via Zoom, and it can be a little overwhelming when there's a lot of people in the room trying to get their points across. And do you really capture what you're trying to talk about when there's too many people? So come up with a number that you think is comfortable for your group. You'll also want to consider having moderators for each of your networking sessions and in each room, so that they are considered the host of the room and can help mitigate any troubles that might come up. And then maybe have a staff member pop in to a few of the different sessions during the course of the networking time if they're overlapping. If you are using Zoom, make sure to check the security settings, and there certainly are a lot of guidances out there to make sure that things are staying safe and infiltration is minimized as much as possible. One of the things that we are doing at NORD is sending out the meeting links for the scheduled meetings much closer to the allocated time than access to the whole conference platform. And we're doing that for a few reasons. First of all, the links are exclusive just for those that have registered. We have a very predetermined set number of spots that can be used. So we need to make sure that those links don't get shared, but we also are doing it for safety and security reasons, that it's an individualized email coming through, not something that we're posting publicly, so that we're really trying to keep the rooms closed, and ready for people that are supposed to be there. If you are using a platform of some kind that people might not be used to using, we strongly recommend hosting training sessions so that your moderators are comfortable using the tool before the attendees show up, to make sure everything is running really, really smoothly. Swag. So swag, some people love it, other people are happy to leave it behind. It's something to think through. How do you want to offer this to virtual attendees if you choose to offer it? Are you going to use it to incentivize paid registrations? And then if you do so, are you fulfilling those orders manually, or are you using a fulfillment house of some kind? A lot of sponsors are used to having their branding on swag. So again, is that a deliverable that you want to continue to offer? I'm seeing a lot of platforms that have downloadable brochures or swag rooms where people can pay with points in exchange for participating on the platform. All different things to keep in mind when you determine what your priorities are. Software platform selection. So this is just as unique as when you're out shopping for in-person meeting venues. Whether you determine that you're at a community center, whether you're at a hotel, a conference center, you're taking the time to shop around and determine what's best for your event. It's very similar for a virtual world. I have found it very important to have a draft of your meeting agenda for the virtual program ready to go. A lot of the platforms want to see about what the duration is, how much content you're looking to put out there, the speakers, how you want to engage your attendees. So really giving that some thought before you jump into these demos will help you understand what you're looking for, but it'll also help the sales representatives understand what you're looking for as well. There are so many platforms out there, and they are at various price points. There are some that are hidden gems, and there are some that just continually rise to the top. Some offer more than you need, and others don't offer enough functionality. So it truly is about you doing your due diligence of what is right for your organization, and make those key priorities known for whomever's on your review and selection committee. So at NORD, we approach this, again, very similar to how we would approach an in-person event. We started by issuing a formal RFP with what our priorities were, and some vendors got back to us and said, I'm sorry, our platform is not the right fit for you. Others did reply, and when we got their responses back, we realized that it wasn't the right fit. But ultimately, we ended up having about 7 to work with, and then we scheduled the demos to see exactly what the different variables were for each of the tools, and ultimately decide what was right for NORD. So again, with your RFP, set your priorities, evaluate the responses, and then determine the top responses. That really should help you narrow it down, because the field is so wide open right now. A few resources. The one that I've been using the most is PCMA. This is an open website for folks that are used to really planning business events. So take the information for what is valuable to you. It's not geared necessarily towards associations or organizations, and can be rather large scale, but I found it really helpful to spend some time on their website just to think through what some of the really big picture key important thoughts are. So that's where I've been spending most of my time, is PCMA. And Allie, I think that's all I have. So thank you all for your time, and we wish you lots of success in 2020 with your events. Can't wait to hear how they go.
Thank you, Carrie, for sharing your experience transitioning to virtual events today, so that our viewers may be more knowledgeable and confident when tackling this challenge. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, alone we are rare, Together we are strong. Bye-bye.